It was probably 110 degrees and it was really hot all day, and then randomly it started raining in the afternoon, off and on, and then the streets were flooding. So we hid in an ice cream shop for about 2 hours while it flooded. We had a lizard living under our kitchen sink. We found dead lizards in the sink. We caught cockroaches in our last area, sent them outside, saw lots of monkeys and lots of parrots. Hard experience was my last area. I had about 5 months left and I was training an American, and we got sent to an area that had never had sisters, and we were whitewashing the area. So they took the elders out and sent us in, and they hadn't had a baptism in over a year in that area. So that was difficult. I learned how to rely on the Lord in a way that I never had before. I learned that the gospel can change people's lives for the better, but those people have to want to change. And so I had to respect people's agency. Favorite food? Well, so I love pan de queijo. I just loved rice and beans. I could eat rice and beans all day because it's just so good. Least favorite food? Probably the piquis that I tried that you could end up with some spines in your mouth. It was a little too dangerous for me to want to eat it very often. We were in my last area, and one day we had no water, and so we had no water for 4 days, and so we had bought large tubes or buckets of water, I guess. I don't know how to describe it, and that's what we used to bathe for about 4 days. And so that was a funny experience, looking back. Sort of stressful at the time. Another funny experience was in my first area, it was our first baptism, or my first baptism, I guess. The baptismal font had broken, and so it wouldn't drain water. And so we spent probably 6 or 7 hours on a Saturday taking buckets of water and pouring them into the toilet. And it was a very dirty font full of bugs, and so we had to pour it all into the toilet and then refill the font bucket by bucket, and that took most of a Saturday so that we could be ready for a baptism later that day. So crazy thing is sometimes you run out of water and you just deal with it. I was in my second area, and there was a family that had been taught by the sisters for a year or two, and all the kids had been baptized, but the parents had not yet been baptized. They came to church every Sunday, but they weren't married yet, so they couldn't be baptized. And my companion and I were trying to figure out how best to help them, to encourage them to save money to be married. And we decided to teach a lesson about eternal families and the temple. And we taught it, and I remember the Spirit being there very strongly, and that if they exercise faith to save money to be married in the temple and eventually to be sealed as a family, that thousands of their ancestors were waiting for the gospel, and that they were so necessary and instrumental for their ancestors who wanted the gospel in their lives. And I had no idea where that came from because I was not the one saying it, but the Spirit was there and helped me to testify to them, and they committed to save up the money, and they got married about 2 months later, and they were recently sealed as a whole family. So that was a really neat experience where I felt the Spirit directing the lesson. Another one is my last area. We were walking down the street one day, and we hadn't really been having success for a while. We were walking down the street, and this woman passed us. Her name was Zelia, and she said, "Are you the sisters for the Mormon church?" And we said, "Yeah, that's us." And she was like, "I'm a member of your church. Can you tell me where it is?" And we wrote down the address, and that Sunday she showed up at church. She caught a taxi and came to church, and she had some things to work out, but we started teaching her the lessons again, and she returned to full activity. And And so that was a really neat experience that the Spirit, Heavenly Father, put us in the path of this person who had been looking for the church and trying to find it for a while. And she found us on the street, and she was able to return to church in full activity. So, yeah. A really neat story. In my third area, there was a boy who was in the area, and he had just left on his mission. He was LDS. He just left on his mission to Provo, Utah. So he had left right before I got to the area, and I got to the area, and I became really good friends with his family and his girlfriend that he had been dating for the last 4 years. And his girlfriend was very, very Catholic, and had no interest in the church whatsoever. And her boyfriend had been on his mission probably for 2 months, and he had challenged her to find out if the church was true. And so we went over. I'd been in the area about a week. We went over to teach Missionary, and she was not super interested. We could just tell that she didn't really want anything to do with it. And then a couple weeks later, so we decided to just kind of be friends with her, talk to her when we saw her, but not push it. And then one Sunday she showed up at church, and we knew when she showed up at church that Sunday that she was ready. And so we went over and we taught Alma 32, and we taught about faith. And we all felt the Spirit very strongly, and we challenged her to read the Book of Mormon to find out if it was true. And so we started to meet with Missionary almost every single day. And very, very quickly, she had opened her heart to the gospel and to the Spirit, and the Spirit started to work on her. And as we taught her, she just had a greater and greater testimony. And so she was baptized about 4 weeks later, and her missionary came home about a year ago, and they were just sealed in the temple recently. And interestingly enough, as he was serving in the States, when I got home from my mission, one of my good friends who was in my ward was Brazilian, not LDS, had come to Utah and was going to school, and he had met the missionaries. And my recent convert's boyfriend, who's serving in Provo, had baptized my friend here. So it was a very interesting mix of people all involved, and it taught me that the Lord is very much in the details of our lives and puts us where we need to be. So